The evening air carried the scent of jasmine through the open windows of Clarence's house as Camilla stood before her dressing room mirror, adjusting the clasp of an exquisite sapphire necklace. The piece sparkled magnificently against her navy silk gown, each stone catching the warm light from the crystal chandelier above. She had discovered earlier that afternoon, while browsing through one of the palace jewelry vaults, tucked away in a velvet-lined drawer that seemed to have been forgotten by time. The necklace was breathtaking in its simplicity and elegance. A cascade of perfectly matched sapphires descended in graduated sizes, each stone surrounded by a delicate setting of white gold and tiny diamonds. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly the work of a master jeweler. Camilla had been immediately drawn to its understated beauty, so different from the more elaborate pieces she typically wore to state functions. There had been no accompanying documentation with the piece, no card indicating its provenance or previous owner, which was unusual, but not entirely uncommon in the vast royal collection. Charles appeared in the doorway behind her, resplendent in his formal evening wear. His black tailcoat was perfectly pressed, his white bow tie precisely knotted, and his various orders and decorations gleamed against his chest. He moved with the practiced ease of someone who had attended thousands of such events throughout his life. Yet tonight there seemed to be an extra spring in his step. The Children's Hospital Gala was one of his favorite annual events, combining his passion for charitable work with an opportunity to raise significant funds for a cause close to his heart. "You look absolutely radiant this evening," he said, approaching to place a gentle kiss on her cheek. His eyes swept appreciatively over her appearance, taking in the elegant lines of her gown and the way her hair had been styled in a sophisticated updo that showcased her graceful neck. But as his gaze fell upon the necklace, something shifted in his expression. The warmth in his eyes flickered, replaced by something that might have been surprise or perhaps recognition. The moment passed so quickly that Camilla might have imagined it, and when she turned to face him fully, his smile had returned. "Thank you, darling," she replied, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her skirt. "I wanted to wear something special tonight. This piece caught my eye in the vault this afternoon. I don't recall seeing it before, but it seemed perfect for the occasion." She touched the necklace gently, admiring how the sapphires complemented her coloring. The deep blue stones brought out the subtle highlights in her eyes and provided a stunning contrast to her fair complexion. Charles nodded, though his response seemed somewhat delayed. "Yes, it's quite beautiful," he said, his voice carrying an odd note that Camilla couldn't quite identify. He cleared his throat and glanced at his watch, a gesture that had become habitual before important events. "We should make our way downstairs. The car will be here shortly, and we don't want to keep the organizers waiting." As they descended the grand staircase of Clarence's house, Camilla felt a thrill of anticipation for the evening ahead. The Children's Hospital Gala was always a highlight of the social season, bringing together influential figures from across British society in support of a worthy cause. Tonight's event promised to be particularly special, with a silent auction featuring donated items from celebrities, artists, and members of the royal family themselves. She had personally contributed a signed first edition of one of her favorite novels, knowing it would appeal to the literary-minded attendees. The drive through London's evening traffic gave them time to review the evening schedule. Charles consulted his briefing notes, prepared by his private secretary, which detailed the key attendees they would need to acknowledge, the major donors who deserved special recognition, and the timeline for speeches and presentations. Camilla reviewed her own notes about the hospital's recent achievements and the specific programs that tonight's fundraising would support. She took particular interest in the new pediatric cancer wing that was under construction, knowing that several families affected by childhood cancer would be attending as guests of honor. "The Chancellor will be there tonight," Charles mentioned, looking up from his papers, "along with several cabinet ministers and the Lord Mayor. The guest list is quite impressive this year." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I believe the Wales family may attend as well, if their schedules permit." Camilla nodded, accustomed to the complex logistics of royal family gatherings. The presence of other family members always added an extra layer of protocol to consider, but she had long since mastered the delicate dance of royal etiquette. She was curious to see Kate again, as they hadn't spoken at length since the Easter celebrations at Windsor Castle several months earlier. The two women had developed a cordial relationship over the years, built on mutual respect and their shared commitment to their royal duties. The Grosvenor House Hotel came into view as their car turned onto Park Lane, its impressive facade illuminated by spotlights for the evening's event. Photographers and camera crews had already assembled behind the barriers, their equipment ready to capture the arrivals of notable guests. A red carpet stretched from the hotel entrance to the curb, flanked by elegant floral arrangements in the hospital's signature colors of blue and white. The sight never failed to impress Camilla, though she had attended countless similar events throughout her years in public life. "The turnout looks excellent," she observed, watching as elegantly dressed couples emerged from luxury vehicles and made their way into the hotel. The women's gowns sparkled under the camera flashes, while the men looked distinguished in their formal evening wear. She could see several familiar faces among the arrivals, including prominent business leaders, entertainment figures, and philanthropists who were regular supporters of the Children's Hospital. As their car pulled to a stop, Charles reached over to squeeze her hand gently. "Ready?" he asked, though it was more of a statement than a question. They both knew the routine well, the careful choreography of a royal arrival that had been perfected through decades of practice. The door would open, they would emerge with practiced smiles, acknowledge the photographers with dignified waves, and make their way into the venue while pausing to speak with the event organizers and key supporters. Camilla took a final moment to check her appearance in the small, compact mirror from her evening bag. The sapphire necklace caught the interior light of the car, sending tiny sparkles across the leather seats. She felt confident and elegant, ready to represent the royal family with grace and dignity at one of the year's most important charitable events. Whatever that momentary expression on Charles's face had meant, she was certain it was nothing more than surprise at seeing an unfamiliar piece from the vast royal jewelry collection. The car door opened, and the sounds of the London evening rushed in along with the flashes of camera bulbs. Charles stepped out first, as protocol dictated, then turned to offer his hand to assist her exit. The crowd of photographers called out greetings and requests for photographs, their voices blending into the familiar symphony of a royal arrival. Camilla emerged gracefully, her gown flowing elegantly as she stood beside her husband, the sapphire necklace gleaming magnificently under the bright lights of the media attention. Together, they began their walk along the red carpet toward the hotel entrance, where the evening's festivities awaited. The Children's Hospital Gala would officially begin in just a few minutes, marking the start of what promised to be both a successful fundraising event and an elegant social occasion. As they paused to speak with the event chairwoman, Camilla felt the familiar satisfaction that came from using her position to support meaningful causes, blissfully unaware of the storm that would soon unfold around the beautiful necklace adorning her throat. The great room of the Grosvenor House Hotel had been transformed into a glittering wonderland for the Children's Hospital Gala. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over round tables draped in pristine white linens, each centerpiece featuring elegant arrangements of white roses and blue delphiniums that echoed the hospital's colors. The silent auction displays lined the perimeter of the room, showcasing everything from luxury vacation packages to original artwork, all donated to support the hospital's vital work with young patients. Camilla and Charles made their entrance to warm applause from the assembled guests, who rose respectfully from their seats as the royal couple was announced. The king acknowledged the greeting with a gracious nod and wave, while Camilla smiled warmly at the familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd. She recognized several regular supporters of royal charities, along with prominent figures from the medical community who had dedicated their careers to pediatric care. As they moved through the room during the reception hour, stopping to greet key supporters and donors, Camilla noticed several admiring glances directed toward her necklace. The sapphires seemed to capture every ray of light in the room, creating a dazzling display that drew the eye naturally. Lady Morrison, a longtime patron of children's charities, was particularly effusive in her praise. "Your Majesty, that necklace is absolutely stunning," she gushed, leaning closer to admire the intricate craftsmanship. "The sapphires are magnificent. I don't think I've seen you wear it before." Her tone carried the enthusiasm of someone who followed royal fashion closely and prided herself on recognizing significant pieces from the collection. Camilla touched the necklace with a pleased smile. "Thank you so much. It's a lovely piece, isn't it? I discovered it in one of the vaults just this afternoon. Sometimes the most beautiful treasures are hidden in plain sight." She was genuinely delighted by the positive reception the jewelry was receiving, feeling that her instinct to choose something special for the evening had been validated. Across the room, Charles was engaged in conversation with the hospital's chief executive about the progress on the new pediatric cancer wing. However, his attention kept drifting toward his wife, specifically to the necklace she wore. Something about it nagged at him, a sense of familiarity that he couldn't quite place. The way the sapphires caught the light, the particular setting of the stones, even the length of the piece seemed to trigger a memory that remained frustratingly just out of reach. The evening progressed smoothly through the cocktail reception, with guests mingling freely and examining the silent auction offerings. Camilla found herself drawn into a fascinating conversation with Dr. Sarah Chun, one of the hospital's leading pediatric oncologists, who was describing the innovative treatments that the new wing would make possible. The doctor's passion for her work was infectious, and Camilla was deeply moved by stories of young patients who had overcome seemingly impossible odds. "The equipment we'll be able to purchase with tonight's proceeds will literally save lives," Dr. Chen explained, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We're looking at cutting-edge imaging technology that will allow us to detect and treat cancers earlier than ever before. Every pound raised tonight translates directly into hope for families facing the unimaginable." It was during this conversation that Camilla first noticed a slight commotion near the entrance to the ballroom. She glanced over to see a familiar figure making a late arrival, and her face lit up with genuine pleasure. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, was being escorted to her table by one of the event organizers, having arrived directly from another engagement. Even from across the room, Kate's natural elegance was unmistakable, her midnight blue gown perfectly complementing her graceful bearing. Charles, who had been monitoring the room with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to managing complex social situations, immediately noticed his daughter-in-law's arrival. He excused himself from his conversation and began making his way across the room to greet her properly. As he moved through the crowd, nodding and smiling at guests along the way, he felt that nagging sense of familiarity about Camilla's necklace growing stronger. Kate's arrival had indeed been delayed due to a prior commitment at a youth center in East London, where she had been launching a new mental health initiative for teenagers. She had changed into her evening gown in the car and applied her makeup during the drive, a skill she had perfected during her years of royal duties. Despite the rushed preparation, she looked flawless as she graciously accepted greetings from the other guests. "Catherine, how wonderful that you could join us," Charles said warmly as he reached her table. "I know tonight's cause is particularly close to your heart." He was aware of her extensive work with children's charities and her particular interest in early childhood development and mental health support for young people. "I wouldn't have missed it for anything," Kate replied, her smile genuine and bright. "The work this hospital does is absolutely incredible. I was just reading about the new research program they're launching." She paused to greet several other guests at nearby tables, demonstrating the natural warmth and grace that had made her such a beloved member of the royal family. As the formal program began and guests took their seats for dinner, Camilla found herself at the head table alongside Charles, with Kate seated several places away. The arrangement was carefully planned to ensure that each member of the royal family could interact with the key donors and supporters throughout the evening. The first course was served as the hospital's chairman rose to address the gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, your majesties, your royal highness," he began, his voice carrying clearly through the now-quiet ballroom. "Tonight we gather not just to enjoy an elegant evening, but to support some of the bravest and most resilient members of our society, the children who are fighting for their lives in our hospital wards." The speech was moving and well-crafted, highlighting specific cases where the hospital's intervention had made the difference between life and death. Camilla found herself deeply touched by the story of a 7-year-old girl who had overcome a rare form of leukemia and was now thriving in school. The necklace felt heavier around her throat as she considered the weight of suffering that these young patients and their families carried. During the main course, conversation at the head table flowed easily between topics of mutual interest. Charles discussed his environmental initiatives with a prominent green energy investor, while Camilla engaged a renowned children's author in conversation about literacy programs in hospitals. The atmosphere was warm and convivial, exactly the kind of setting that encouraged generous giving to the cause. It was as the dessert was being served that Kate finally had an opportunity to approach the head table during a natural break in the formal program. She moved gracefully between the tables, stopping to acknowledge various guests with brief conversations. Her path naturally led her toward Camilla and Charles, and she was looking forward to catching up with them properly after the constraints of the formal dinner seating. "Camilla, you look absolutely radiant tonight," Kate said as she approached, her voice warm with genuine affection. The two women had developed a comfortable relationship over the years, built on mutual respect and their shared experiences of marrying into the royal family. Kate had always appreciated Camilla's straightforward approach and her dedication to her charitable work. Camilla rose to greet her with a warm embrace, the sapphire necklace catching the light as she moved. "Catherine, darling, it's so lovely to see you. You look stunning as always. I'm so glad you could make it tonight, despite your busy schedule." She gestured toward the beautiful ballroom filled with engaged guests. "It's turning out to be quite a successful evening." Kate's eyes naturally fell to the necklace as they spoke, drawn by the magnificent sparkle of the sapphires. For a moment, her expression didn't change, maintaining the polite interest appropriate for admiring a beautiful piece of jewelry. But then, slowly, something shifted in her features. The smile remained in place, but her eyes widened almost imperceptibly, and a slight flush crept up her neck. "That's a beautiful necklace," Kate said, her voice maintaining its warm tone despite the subtle tension that had suddenly appeared in her posture. "The sapphires are absolutely gorgeous. It looks very familiar." Camilla beamed at the compliment, pleased that Kate had noticed the piece. "Thank you, dear. I found it in one of the palace vaults this afternoon. I thought it would be perfect for tonight." She touched the stones gently, unaware of the growing tension in Kate's expression. Sometimes the most wonderful pieces are just waiting to be rediscovered. It was at that precise moment that Charles, who had been engaged in conversation with the hospital director, turned to join their discussion. His eyes immediately went to Kate's face, taking in her carefully controlled expression, then shifted to the necklace around Camilla's throat. The combination hit him like a physical blow, and suddenly, the nagging familiarity crystallized into sharp, uncomfortable recognition. The sapphire necklace wasn't just any piece from the royal collection. It was Kate's necklace, a wedding gift from her parents that she had treasured for years. Charles remembered it clearly now, seeing it around Kate's neck at numerous state functions, noting how perfectly it complemented her coloring, hearing William mention how much the piece meant to his wife because of its sentimental value. The realization sent a chill through him as he understood the magnitude of the situation that was unfolding before his eyes. Charles felt his breath catch in his throat as the full reality of the situation became clear. The necklace that Camilla wore with such obvious pleasure was indeed Kate's most treasured piece of jewelry, a wedding gift from her parents that held immense sentimental value. He could recall with painful clarity the moment Kate had first shown it to the family, her eyes bright with joy as she described how her mother had saved for years to purchase it. The piece had been specially commissioned from a renowned London jeweler, designed to incorporate sapphires that had belonged to Kate's grandmother. The king's mind raced as he tried to understand how this could have happened. The royal jewelry collection was meticulously cataloged and managed, with detailed records of every piece's provenance and current location. Personal jewelry belonging to individual family members was kept separately from the crown jewels and state collection. Kate's necklace should never have been accessible to anyone else, let alone found its way into a vault where Camilla could discover it. Kate maintained her composure with the skill of someone trained in royal protocol, but Charles could see the effort it was costing her. Her knuckles were slightly white where she gripped her evening bag, and though her smile remained in place, there was a tightness around her eyes that spoke of barely contained emotion. She was clearly struggling with how to address the situation without creating a scene at such an important charitable event. "Yes, it is quite familiar," Kate repeated, her voice carefully neutral. "I believe it may actually be, well, I have one very similar to it." The careful phrasing was diplomatic, giving Camilla an opportunity to realize the mistake without forcing a direct confrontation. Kate's training in handling delicate situations was evident in her choice of words, designed to preserve dignity for all parties involved. Camilla looked puzzled by the comment, glancing down at the necklace, and then back at Kate with genuine confusion. "Oh, how interesting," she said, clearly not grasping the implication. "Great minds think alike, as they say. Though I must admit, I don't recall seeing you wear one like this before." Her tone was friendly and conversational, indicating that she had completely missed the subtle, diplomatic hint Kate had offered. Charles realized that he needed to intervene before the situation deteriorated further. The ballroom was filled with prominent guests, media representatives, and supporters who would certainly notice any tension between the royal family members. A public disagreement or uncomfortable moment would not only overshadow the important charitable cause they were there to support, but could also generate unwanted speculation in the press for weeks to come. "Perhaps we should step outside for a moment," Charles suggested quietly, his voice calm, but carrying an undertone that both women immediately recognized as serious. "I believe there may be some confusion that we should address privately." He gestured toward a small anteroom adjacent to the ballroom that he had noticed earlier, grateful that the hotel's layout provided an option for discreet conversation. Kate nodded gratefully at the suggestion, relief evident in her expression that Charles had recognized the need for immediate action. Camilla looked between them with growing bewilderment, clearly sensing that something was amiss, but unable to understand what had caused the sudden shift in atmosphere. She had been enjoying the evening immensely and was confused by the apparent need for a private conference. The trio excused themselves from the table with practiced ease, Charles explaining to nearby guests that they needed to briefly discuss some family matters. Their departure was so smoothly executed that most of the assembled guests barely noticed, though a few sharp-eyed society reporters made mental notes about the unexpected departure of multiple royals from the main event. The anteroom was elegantly appointed, but much smaller than the grand ballroom, furnished with comfortable chairs and a small side table. Once the door was closed behind them, providing blessed privacy from the hundreds of eyes in the main room, the atmosphere immediately became more tense. Kate's carefully maintained composure began to show signs of strain, while Camilla looked increasingly worried about what could possibly require such urgent private discussion. "Catherine," Charles began gently, his voice carrying the weight of someone who understood the gravity of the situation, "I believe you're trying to tell us something about the necklace Camilla is wearing." He looked directly at his daughter-in-law, encouraging her to speak freely now that they were away from public scrutiny. Kate took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts before responding. "Yes, I was. Charles, that necklace, it belongs to me. It was a wedding gift from my parents, commissioned specially for our wedding day. I've worn it to numerous state functions over the years." Her voice was steady, but carried an unmistakable note of distress. "I don't understand how it came to be in the palace vaults, or how it was accessible to anyone else." Camilla's face went pale as the words sank in, her hand instinctively moving to touch the necklace at her throat. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Catherine, I had no idea. There was no documentation with it, no indication that it belonged to anyone specifically. I simply found it in one of the vault drawers this afternoon and thought it would be perfect for tonight. The queen consort looked genuinely stricken by the revelation, her earlier pleasure in the beautiful piece now replaced by acute embarrassment and concern. She began to reach for the clasp, clearly intending to remove the necklace immediately. "I'm so terribly sorry, dear. I would never have taken it if I had known. Here, let me." Charles held up a gentle hand to stop her. "Not here," he said quietly but firmly. "We cannot have you removing jewelry in the middle of a public event. It would raise far too many questions and potentially create exactly the kind of speculation we want to avoid." His years of experience in managing royal protocol were evident in his quick assessment of the situation's optics. Kate nodded in agreement, despite the obvious difficulty of the situation for her. "Charles is right. We need to handle this carefully, for everyone's sake. The important thing is that we sort this out properly after the event." Her voice carried a note of resignation that spoke to her understanding of how royal life sometimes required personal feelings to be subordinated to public appearances. "But how did this happen?" Camilla asked, her distress evident in her voice. The jewelry management system is supposed to prevent exactly this sort of confusion. Personal pieces should never be mixed with the general collection. She was clearly struggling with both the immediate embarrassment and the broader implications of such a significant administrative failure. Charles had been wondering the same thing, his mind already working through the possible explanations and the steps that would need to be taken to ensure such a situation never occurred again. "That's something we'll need to investigate thoroughly," he said gravely. "There are protocols in place precisely to prevent personal jewelry from being confused with the crown collection. Someone made a serious error, and we need to understand how and why." The sound of applause from the main ballroom reminded them that the evening's program was continuing without them, and that their absence would soon be noticed if they didn't return. Kate glanced toward the door, clearly torn between her personal distress and her sense of duty to the charitable event. "We should go back," she said reluctantly. "People will start to wonder where we've gone, and tonight is too important to be overshadowed by this situation." Camilla looked between Charles and Kate with obvious anguish. "I feel absolutely terrible about this," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Catherine, the last thing I would ever want is to cause you distress or to take something that belongs to you. Your parents, they must have put so much thought and love into choosing this piece for you." Kate's expression softened slightly at Camilla's obvious distress. Despite her own hurt and confusion, she could see that the queen consort was genuinely mortified by the situation. "I know you didn't do this intentionally, Camilla. This isn't your fault. Someone made a mistake with the jewelry management, and unfortunately, we're all dealing with the consequences now." Charles appreciated Kate's graciousness in the face of what must have been a deeply upsetting discovery. The necklace represented far more than just expensive jewelry. It was a tangible symbol of her parents' love and sacrifice, worn at some of the most important moments of her royal life. To see it around someone else's neck, however innocently, had to have been a shock. "For now, we finished the evening as planned," Charles decided, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions under pressure. "Tomorrow, we'll conduct a full investigation into how this happened and implement whatever changes are necessary to prevent it from occurring again. Catherine, I give you my word that we'll get to the bottom of this." Kate nodded, visibly steeling herself to return to the public event with grace and dignity intact. "Thank you, Charles. I appreciate that." She turned to Camilla with a slight smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And, Camilla, please don't let this ruin your evening. The necklace does look beautiful on you, even if the circumstances are unfortunate." As they prepared to return to the ballroom, each of them was grappling with their own complex emotions. Charles felt the weight of responsibility for somehow allowing such a breach of protocol to occur under his watch. Kate was struggling with the personal violation she felt, tempered by her understanding of the need to handle the situation diplomatically. Camilla was overwhelmed with embarrassment and guilt, despite knowing she had acted innocently. The trio composed themselves before rejoining the gala, each drawing on years of training in maintaining public composure regardless of personal circumstances. As they opened the door to return to the ballroom, they were greeted by the warm sounds of conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the tense discussion that had just concluded in the privacy of the anteroom. The return to the ballroom required every ounce of royal training the three possessed. Charles led the way with his characteristic measured stride, while Camilla followed closely, her hand unconsciously avoiding touching the necklace that had been a source of pride just minutes earlier. Kate brought up the rear, her famous smile firmly in place despite the turmoil she was experiencing internally. To the casual observer, they appeared to be simply returning from a brief family consultation, which was precisely the impression they needed to maintain. The evening's program had continued in their absence, with the silent auction bidding becoming increasingly spirited as guests competed for the most desirable items. The Master of Ceremonies was announcing the current high bids for various lots, including a weekend at a Scottish castle that was generating particular enthusiasm among the assembled philanthropists. The atmosphere remained festive and generous, exactly what the organizers had hoped for when planning the event. As they resumed their places at the head table, several guests approached with compliments about the evening's success. Lady Pemberton, a stalwart supporter of children's charities, was particularly effusive in her praise for the organization and the turnout. "Your Majesties, what a magnificent evening this has been," she gushed, clearly delighted by the event's obvious success. "The response to the auction has been extraordinary, and the presentations about the hospital's work have been so moving." Camilla managed to engage warmly in the conversation, drawing on decades of experience in maintaining composure during challenging situations. However, those who knew her well might have noticed a subtle difference in her demeanor, a slight reserve that hadn't been present earlier in the evening. The necklace seemed to weigh more heavily around her throat with each passing moment, though she was careful not to touch it or draw any attention to it. Charles found himself watching Kate carefully throughout the remainder of the evening, noting how professionally she handled her interactions with other guests despite what he knew must be considerable personal distress. She moved through the crowd with her usual grace, engaging in meaningful conversations about the hospital's work and expressing genuine interest in the stories shared by families who had benefited from the institution's care. During one particularly poignant moment, Kate spent several minutes in deep conversation with Maria Santos, a young mother whose 5-year-old son had successfully undergone treatment for a rare heart condition at the hospital. The woman's gratitude was overwhelming as she described how the medical team had saved her child's life, and Kate's response was both compassionate and knowledgeable, demonstrating her genuine commitment to understanding the impact of the charity she supported. "The princess really understands what families go through," Maria confided to her husband afterward, wiping tears from her eyes. "She asked such thoughtful questions about Miguel's recovery, and you could tell she truly cared about his story. It means everything to have someone in her position take such a personal interest in what we've been through." Meanwhile, Charles was grappling with his own concerns about the broader implications of the jewelry mix-up. As the evening progressed, he found his attention repeatedly drawn to questions about how such a significant breach of protocol could have occurred. The royal household operated on systems and procedures developed over centuries, designed specifically to prevent exactly this sort of confusion. The fact that Kate's personal jewelry had somehow found its way into a general vault suggested a serious failure somewhere in the chain of custody. The auction portion of the evening reached its climax with the presentation of the final lot, a private dinner for 12 at Buckingham Palace, hosted by Charles and Camilla themselves. The bidding was fierce, with several wealthy philanthropists competing enthusiastically for the unique opportunity. When the hammer finally fell at £45,000, the room erupted in applause, bringing the total funds raised for the evening well above the organizers' most optimistic projections. "Ladies and gentlemen, thanks to your incredible generosity tonight, we have raised over £300,000 for the Children's Hospital," announced the chairman to thunderous applause. This money will directly support the new pediatric cancer wing and ensure that we can continue providing world-class care to the youngest and most vulnerable members of our community. As the formal program concluded and guests began to mingle for the final reception, Camilla found herself in conversation with Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the hospital's chief of pediatric oncology. The doctor was describing the specific equipment that would be purchased with the evening's proceeds, but Camilla found it difficult to concentrate fully on the conversation. Her mind kept returning to Kate's stricken expression when she had first seen the necklace, and the obvious effort it was costing the younger woman to maintain her composure throughout the evening. The new imaging equipment will allow us to detect tumors at much earlier stages, Dr. Harper was explaining enthusiastically. Early detection is absolutely crucial in pediatric cancers, where time can literally mean the difference between life and death. Your support tonight is going to save lives, Your Majesty. I can't thank you enough for lending your presence to our cause. Camilla forced herself to focus on the doctor's words, recognizing the genuine passion and dedication in the woman's voice. The work you and your colleagues do is truly remarkable, she replied, her voice carrying sincere admiration despite her personal distress. To dedicate your lives to helping children overcome such devastating illnesses takes extraordinary courage and skill. Across the room, Kate was engaged in her own challenging conversation with Lord Davidson, a prominent businessman who had been a major supporter of royal charities for decades. He was praising her commitment to children's causes and asking about her future plans for expanding her work in the field. Kate responded thoughtfully and professionally, but Charles could see the strain in her posture and the slight tightness around her eyes that indicated her ongoing distress. Your Royal Highness, your work with early childhood development has been groundbreaking, Lord Davidson was saying. The research programs you've supported have already begun to show real results in helping children from disadvantaged backgrounds. I hope you'll consider expanding those initiatives even further in the coming year. Kate nodded graciously, genuinely interested in the topic despite her current emotional state. Thank you, Lord Davidson. The research is indeed showing promising results, and I'm committed to continuing that work. Children deserve every possible advantage in their early years, and if we can provide better support systems, we can change lives for generations to come. As the evening drew to a close and guests began to make their departures, the three royals found themselves naturally gravitating toward each other again. The formal farewells were conducted with typical royal efficiency, but Charles could sense the underlying tension that continued to permeate the group. The knowledge of the jewelry situation hung over them like a cloud, casting a shadow over what had otherwise been a highly successful charitable event. The ride back to their respective residences was conducted in relative silence, each lost in their own thoughts about the evening's revelations. Charles stared out the window at the London streetlights, his mind already working through the investigation that would need to be conducted and the procedural changes that might be necessary. The failure of the jewelry management system represented more than just an embarrassing mix-up. It highlighted potential vulnerabilities in the broader systems that protected royal family privacy and protocol. Camilla sat quietly beside him, the weight of the necklace feeling almost unbearable around her throat. She understood that she would need to return it to Kate as soon as possible, but the knowledge that she had unknowingly worn another woman's treasured jewelry to such a public event filled her with deep embarrassment. The piece had felt so perfect for the evening, and the compliments she had received throughout the night now seemed hollow and misplaced. In her own car, traveling to Kensington Palace, Kate finally allowed some of her carefully controlled emotions to surface. The strain of maintaining perfect composure throughout the evening while watching someone else wear her most precious piece of jewelry had been exhausting. The necklace held such personal significance, representing not just her parents' love and sacrifice, but also some of the most important moments of her royal life. To see it around someone else's neck, however innocently, had felt like a violation of something deeply private and meaningful. As each of them arrived at their respective homes, They carried with them the knowledge that the next day would bring difficult conversations, thorough investigations, and the need to rebuild trust that had been inadvertently damaged. The success of the Children's Hospital Gala would be remembered and celebrated, but for these three individuals, the evening would forever be marked by the moment when a beautiful sapphire necklace became the center of an unprecedented breach of royal protocol. The implications of the evening's discoveries would ripple far beyond the immediate embarrassment and hurt feelings. Questions would need to be asked about how personal property had become confused with the crown collection, what safeguards had failed, and what changes would be necessary to prevent such situations in the future. For now, though, each of them faced the immediate challenge of processing their emotions and preparing for the conversations that tomorrow would inevitably bring. The morning after the gala dawned gray and drizzly, matching the somber mood that had settled over the royal households. Charles had barely slept, his mind churning through the implications of the previous evening's discovery. He had already spoken with his private secretary at 6 in the morning, requesting an immediate and thorough investigation into the jewelry management protocols. The conversation had been brief, but pointed, leaving no doubt about the seriousness with which he viewed the situation. At Clarence's house, Camilla stood before her dressing room mirror, the sapphire necklace laid carefully on the velvet jewelry tray before her. In the harsh light of morning, the piece seemed to mock her with its beauty. Each sapphire caught the gray daylight filtering through the windows, sparkling as magnificently as it had the night before, but now the sight filled her with nothing but regret and embarrassment. She had spent much of the night composing and recomposing a letter of apology to Kate in her mind, trying to find words that could adequately express her mortification at the situation. The knowledge that she had unknowingly worn such a personally significant piece of jewelry to a public event felt like a violation of the trust and respect that should exist between family members, even though her actions had been entirely innocent. Charles appeared in the doorway, already dressed for the day ahead despite the early hour. His expression was grave as he took in the sight of his wife standing beside the necklace, clearly struggling with the emotional weight of the situation. "The investigation has already begun," he said quietly, moving to stand beside her. "Whatever happened, we'll get to the bottom of it." "That doesn't change what I've done," Camilla replied, her voice thick with emotion. Catherine must feel so violated, seeing her treasured necklace around someone else's neck at such a public event. "I keep thinking about how I would feel if the situation were reversed." She touched the necklace gently, as if trying to understand how something so beautiful could have caused such pain. Meanwhile, at Kensington Palace, Kate was having her own difficult morning. She had explained the situation to William the night before, and his anger about the breach of protocol had been evident, though he had been careful to direct his frustration at the system rather than at any individual. "This kind of mix-up should be impossible," he had said firmly. "Personal jewelry should never, under any circumstances, end up accessible to anyone else." Kate was scheduled to attend a school visit that morning, part of her ongoing work with early childhood education initiatives. As she prepared for the engagement, she found herself repeatedly checking her jewelry box, as if needing to reassure herself that her other personal pieces were still secure. The violation of privacy, she felt, went beyond just the necklace itself. It raised questions about what other personal items might be vulnerable to similar confusion. At 10 o'clock sharp, Charles's private secretary, Sir James Morrison, was ushered into the king's study, carrying a thick folder of documents. His expression was grim as he settled into the chair across from Charles's desk, clearly bringing news that was not pleasant to deliver. "Your Majesty, we've conducted a preliminary investigation into the jewelry management protocols, and I'm afraid the findings are quite disturbing." Charles leaned forward, his attention fully focused on the report. "Tell me what you've discovered, James. I need to understand exactly how this situation could have occurred." His voice carried the authority of someone who expected complete honesty, regardless of how uncomfortable the truth might be. Sir James consulted his notes before beginning his explanation. "It appears that during the recent reorganization of the jewelry vaults, several pieces of personal property belonging to various family members were mistakenly transferred to the general Crown collection storage. The error occurred because some personal pieces had been temporarily moved to the main vaults during renovation work at Kensington Palace several months ago. The king's expression darkened as the implications became clear. Are you telling me that other family members' personal property may also have been affected by this error? The thought that Kate's necklace might not be the only personal item that had been mishandled was deeply troubling. I'm afraid that appears to be the case, Your Majesty, Sir James confirmed reluctantly. We're conducting a complete inventory now, but preliminary findings suggest that items belonging to several family members may have been incorrectly cataloged and stored. The documentation systems appear to have failed at multiple points during the transfer and reorganization process. Charles felt his anger building, though he kept his expression carefully controlled. James, this is completely unacceptable. The royal family's personal property must be absolutely secure and properly managed. The fact that such a fundamental breach of protocol has occurred suggests serious problems with our administrative systems. At that same moment, Kate was arriving at St. Mary's Primary School in Camden, where she was scheduled to observe new reading programs that had been implemented with support from her charitable foundation. The children's enthusiastic welcome provided a welcome distraction from the previous evening's troubles, and Kate found herself genuinely engaged in watching the innovative teaching methods being demonstrated. Your Royal Highness, the children have been so excited about your visit, explained Mrs. Patricia Williams, the school's headmistress. They prepared a special presentation about how the new reading programs have helped improve their skills. The results have been remarkable since we implemented the changes you supported. Kate smiled warmly as she watched a group of 7-year-olds demonstrate their improved reading abilities, their faces bright with pride and accomplishment. This is wonderful to see, she said genuinely. Education is such a powerful tool for changing lives, and programs like this can make a real difference for these children's futures. Back at Clarence House, Camilla had made a decision. She picked up the telephone and dialed Kensington Palace directly, asking to speak with Kate personally. The conversation would be difficult, but she felt it was necessary to address the situation directly rather than hiding behind formal protocols or intermediaries. "Catherine, it's Camilla," she said when Kate answered the phone during a brief break between school visits. "I know you're busy with engagements today, but I felt I needed to call you personally. I cannot begin to express how sorry I am about last night. I had no idea the necklace belonged to you, and I feel absolutely terrible about the entire situation." Kate's response was gracious despite the obvious strain in her voice. "Thank you for calling, Camilla. I know you didn't do anything intentionally wrong. This is clearly a systematic failure rather than any personal fault on your part." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Though I must admit, it was quite shocking to see my necklace at such a public event." "I can only imagine," Camilla replied, her voice heavy with emotion. "Catherine, that necklace is absolutely beautiful, and knowing now that it was a wedding gift from your parents makes the situation even more painful. I would like to return it to you personally at your convenience, along with my most sincere apologies." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with both women working to maintain the dignity and mutual respect that their positions required while acknowledging the genuine hurt and embarrassment that had been caused. Kate's graciousness in the face of what must have been a deeply upsetting situation only increased Camilla's respect for her, while also deepening her own sense of guilt about the incident. By late afternoon, Charles had received the full preliminary report from Sir James, and the scope of the administrative failure was even worse than initially suspected. In addition to Kate's necklace, several other pieces of personal jewelry belonging to various family members had been incorrectly moved and cataloged, creating potential for similar incidents in the future. "The entire jewelry management system needs to be overhauled," Charles declared after reviewing the findings. "This kind of fundamental error in handling personal property is completely unacceptable. I want new protocols implemented immediately, with multiple safeguards to ensure personal items remain completely separate from the Crown collection." The king also insisted on personally reviewing the security measures surrounding all family members' personal property, recognizing that the breach went beyond simple administrative error to touch on issues of privacy and respect that were fundamental to maintaining trust within the royal family. That evening, Camilla made the journey to Kensington Palace to personally return the necklace to Kate. The meeting took place in Kate's private sitting room, away from the formal protocols that usually governed interactions between family members. The conversation was emotional but healing, with both women acknowledging the pain the situation had caused while working to rebuild the trust that had been damaged. "I want you to know that I've never received so many compliments on a piece of jewelry," Camilla said as she carefully placed the necklace in Kate's hands. "Everyone remarked on how beautiful it was, and now I understand why. Your parents chose something truly special for you." Kate's eyes filled with tears as she held her beloved necklace again, feeling the familiar weight of the sapphires and remembering the joy on her parents' faces when they had presented it to her. "Thank you for bringing it back personally, Camilla. That means a great deal to me." She looked up with a slight smile. "And I'm glad it received such lovely compliments, even under these circumstances." The investigation continued for several more weeks, resulting in comprehensive changes to the royal household's property management systems. New protocols were implemented to ensure absolute separation between personal and crown property, with multiple verification steps required for any transfers or movements of jewelry and other valuables. While the immediate crisis was resolved through the personal grace and dignity shown by all parties involved, the incident served as a stark reminder of the complex challenges involved in maintaining the privacy and security of royal family life. The sapphire necklace returned to its rightful place in Kate's jewelry collection, but the memory of that uncomfortable evening at the Children's Hospital Gala would serve as a lasting lesson about the importance of proper protocols and the very human consequences when those systems fail. The gala itself had been a tremendous success, raising more money than ever before for the hospital's vital work with young patients. In the end, that charitable triumph became the evening's lasting legacy, while the jewelry incident served as a private reminder to all involved about the delicate balance required to maintain both personal dignity and public service in the unique world of modern royalty.